Well, good afternoon. A happy Thursday to you. Good to be with you this day of the week. Too bad I couldn't get to you on Tuesday. The second Tuesday of the month is when I have my ministers' meeting. The pastors of South County get together and fellowship and go through a book and take time to pray together. So it just becomes challenging for me to do a Tuesday video on those Tuesdays. So maybe moving forward, I should prepare for that expectation or lack of expectation that on the second Tuesday of the month I won't be doing a video. But the other thing happening in terms of just me being with you on these Tuesdays and Thursdays for reflections on the Word is next week I will be on vacation, so no videos on Tuesday or Thursday next week as well. I hope both in terms of you missing it and not missing it, if that makes sense. I hope there are still people watching these things. I hope that it is being edifying and just directing you to the person of God, the provision of God, the Word of God, in terms of all the things that secures us in our life today. That's kind of the point of these videos. But on the other hand, I hope that you're also sustaining yourself in terms of just your own knowledge of God, your own interaction with the Word, and being built up in prayer and worship and fellowship and the Word, so that again you can do without it, but nice to have it be here. So that there's that balance in terms of what I hope the ways I hope you would be internalizing these videos. But we are in Luke 21. This is still flowing from a desire on Holy Week to focus on the person of Jesus and the different things that were happening during the week. One thing that he did do in preparing his disciples for his departing the earth is to talk about the end times, to talk about what would happen in both their near future and the far future. That's what's so important to remember in this passage, that is what Jesus is talking about. And I do believe that we see different markers in the text as far as what is just most realistic about what happened in 70 AD and what would then happen in the future, even future to us. Remember, 70 AD and the time that Jesus is speaking this is future to them. Jesus is being prophetic even to talk about what will happen. 70 AD is the time that the temple is destroyed, that Jerusalem is effectively taken over, by the Romans. Basically the way the Roman government functioned in its empire is that you can take care of yourself as long as you can take care of yourself, and honor Rome in the context of them being the ultimate authority. But if there's too much dissension, there's too many problems, there's too much lawlessness, then the Romans would come in and just kind of take over. And that's what happens in 70 AD. So Jesus, knowing that that was going to happen, he wanted to prepare the disciples for that. In fact, when he is looking at the temple and says, hey, not one stone of this temple will be on another, that's certainly what he's pointing to. That's what prompts a question. When is this going to happen, and when is going to be the signs of your coming, and so therefore we have to understand those two different aspects of what the disciples are asking, and so therefore in Jesus' answer, he's giving an answer for both time frames. Now those questions do come up more in Matthew as far as what they're asking about. Specifically, when's this going to happen as far as the stones not being on top of each other, i.e. the temple being destroyed. What's going to be the signs of your coming. That doesn't happen as much. Like those questions aren't specified as well in Luke. But where we are is in verse 20. Where Jesus starts communicating to them about 70 AD and what's happening in terms of the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem being overrun, by the Romans. We also do have to understand just the both and aspect of prophecy. I think I've even mentioned this, but maybe just going over it briefly just because I can't remember and it's so important. There is an aspect of what Jesus is talking about here in terms of 70 AD that happened in 70 AD, and then it might happen again in a fuller time in the future. I think in a lot of places that we've been so far, in terms of, nations rising against nations, kingdom against kingdom, persecuted in the synagogue, put in prison, don't be afraid of what you're going to say when you stand before leaders. I think there would be an aspect of how those prophecies would be fulfilled in the disciples' lifetime, but a fuller expression of that will be the end times, in terms of the Antichrist rising up and establishing his kingdom on the earth, and then Jesus coming in after 7 years and establishing his kingdom on the earth. And so there's battles, in all different aspects of that. And so basically in verse 20, this is what what Jesus shares about what Luke shares about what Jesus shared to the apostles to prepare them. It says, "When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those in the city get out, and let those in the country not enter the city. For this is the time of punishment and fulfillment of all that has been written. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. There will be great distress in the land and wrath against this people. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." And so when we look at the dynamics of what is described here, certainly of events that did happen in 70 AD, a fitting description of what happened, as we can look backwards at what happened in 70 AD. This is what the Romans did in terms of surrounding the city and laying it to siege. I think there is historical evidence of people dying in the city and not dying in the country, in terms of those who did flee. In terms of either Jesus' direction or natural response of getting away from the danger. But to see that Jesus is giving practical instruction here in terms of just what they should do, in terms of the dynamics. Maybe there might have been some temptation because of the fact that Jerusalem is a walled city. It's a beautiful city. It's God's city. That's where our protection is. Let's run to the city, and that's where we're going to be safe. Nope, that its desolation is near. When you see this happening, get out, because really God's disfavor of the Jews is being expressed. That's another thing that is involved in this text, that Jesus makes clear that this is happening certainly by virtue of the dynamics of the armies of the world and the power of Rome, but it's also by virtue of the hand of God allowing the Romans to do this to the Jews, in terms of their rejection of Christ, in terms of their rejection of God's Messiah and what his will would be for their lives. And so that is why, there's also an aspect of the fact that because Jesus is sacrificed, because Jesus died, the truth that is revealed in Scripture, we're actually in the book of Hebrews going through in our website reading. And what is being reinforced in the chapters that we're in, as far as 8, 9, and 10, is just the value of Jesus compared to the Old Testament system, and how Jesus could be sacrificed once for all because he was perfect in himself, that he didn't need a sacrifice to be made both for him and then he would make a sacrifice for the people like the high priest did, that Jesus could just sacrifice himself, and he willingly did that, and therefore becomes our great high priest. But then it makes sacrifices in the temple unnecessary. And so part of what God's declaration is in allowing the Romans to do what they did in 70 AD is, I'm allowing my temple to be destroyed because of the fact that it's not necessary anymore. That is not the nature of worship. When Jesus was talking to the woman at the well, and he was talking about, she actually brought up, you Jews, you worship in Jerusalem because you think that's the place that, God is honored, and we Samaritans, we worship over here in Samaria. That goes back to the divided kingdom, but maybe I won't go there in terms of this video. But what does Jesus say? I'm looking for worshipers that worship in grace and truth, spirit and truth. There you go. It's not going to be that what Jesus is instituting and bringing in is the idea that it's not going to be about a location. It's not going to be about God's presence in a building. It's going to be about God's presence in His people, in those who come to Christ for salvation. And so I think that's why you have the destruction of the temple to reinforce that point. But to me, God expresses His concern for people. Jesus is reinforcing that in terms of what He says. I just love this line, that talks about how dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. This is Jesus showing that God has an awareness of life. He has the awareness of what it's like to be pregnant. He knows what it's like to be nursing a child. He knows the physical burden that and the stress that places on you. And so now if you put on top of the fact that, hey, now you have to flee, you have to leave your home, you have to leave the comfort of what you've established there in terms of safety and provision and go to something that is unpredictable. And to put that on top of this dynamic of, taking care of a child or being pregnant, Jesus is just recognizing the reality of that. So I just love that Jesus makes that statement to almost say that he has great compassion and mercy towards the struggles that we have. Like he mentioned specifically the pregnant mothers and nursing and pregnant women with nursing mothers, that there would be others that it would be problematic for too, in terms of the lame, the elderly. He mentioned this specifically, but God would have compassion on all that would have particular struggle in fulfilling His will, fulfilling the direction that He's given in terms of providing physical safety for them. But to know that this is all part of God's plan. This is something God has ordained. It's something that God is going to use. In this whole aspect of what He says in verse 24, they will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And I think this is where Jesus takes a bit of a jump from the current context, the current future of these disciples, and starts pointing to something to the far future. The times of the Gentiles being fulfilled. I don't know that was fulfilled in 70 AD. In terms of God's economy, in terms of God's thinking, could it be? I don't think that's what Jesus goes from here in terms of what He then further defines about what's going to happen. I think Jesus is using this as a way to point things now to the future, to say, okay, I've talked about what's going to happen in 70 AD, but these things, this calamity, this problem, these issues that are going to happen around Jerusalem is going to continue until the time of the Gentiles is over. And I think like what we see in terms of just the establishment of the church, the work of the rejection of the gospel by the Jews and the acceptance of the gospel by the Gentiles, that certainly could be part of what Jesus is talking about as far as the time of the Gentiles. But it is more talking about the fact that the Gentile nations, the Gentile kingdoms, the disobedient Gentiles, like they're going to have their way with this location, with this geographic location, that still is a blessed location. It is still something that God regards with favor, in terms of that area of Palestine that was promised to Abraham. But there's a different sheriff in town. There's a different power, that is being expressed, and Jesus is just preparing them for that. In terms of their Jewishness. Then he says, there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. Men will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. And so it's these aspects of the cosmic changes, the changes in earth, sky, signs in the sun, moon, and stars. That's not what we saw in 70 AD, but as Jesus talks about this time of the ending of the time of the Gentiles and his return being connected to that, that's where I think Jesus is talking about a future time. And this, we will end here, but I wanted to read that, maybe just have those verses sifting in your head, as you talk about coming back a couple of weeks from now, on that Tuesday. But just to think, how we're seeing this now, that there are aspects of the deterioration of creation that is going to be part of the signs to indicate Jesus is coming. And I think we've seen that in terms of the deterioration of the earth, and as that continues, it's just a further reinforcement that, again, God is in control, but God is doing something to bring things to his desired end, and we can be comforted in that in terms of the redemption that will be ours. But we'll unpack a little bit of that more the next time that we are I suppose it's a week and a half from now. All right, so I will be here this Sunday, then Spencer will be covering on the 25th, and so God bless you in your day today.